I was pretty interested in doing law primarily because I saw Suits, right? And I was like, okay, this is me. I was seriously considering being a diplomat.
How was it being a TA for the subject at PESU?
Oh boy. It was definitely an interesting experience. I think the biggest advantage of what what draws me to systems the most is this fact. And it's been painful to see just how bad I am at doing this. I was that one kid in English class who took creative writing very seriously. I would write like my life depended on it.
Hello everyone and welcome to EC Campus's very own podcast, the ECC Odyssey, where people meet stories. I'm your host, Reema Sarkar.
And I'm Parikshit. Today we have a really interesting episode lined up. We have a tech enthusiast, we have a systems engineer, and we have a metalhead who's there with us. He's been the head of PESU Innovation Labs earlier, and he currently works at Couchbase.
Welcome to our podcast, Anirudh Rowjee.
Thank you, Reema and Parikshit.
Let's start with something interesting. I heard you were going to be a lawyer instead of going down the tech path.
Yeah, so I think until about the 11th grade, I was pretty interested in doing law primarily because I saw Suits, right? And I was like, okay, this is me. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I had a whole Model UN era where I wanted to, I was seriously considering being a diplomat for India, but that didn't pan out because I fell in love with computer science a little later. And I realized that I might actually have a bigger advantage here. Right. So yeah, I was pushing for it, but high command sort of disagreed on that. So here we are. But I would say all in all, it's been a pretty interesting journey. I've been having a lot of fun so far. So yeah.
That's nice.
All right, that's great. So, all right. So you had been the head at PESU Innovation Labs as well earlier, right? How did that help you, and what is PESU Innovation Labs and what do they really do?
So PESU Innovation Labs is PES's oldest student-run research body.
Wow.
And we've been around for, I think, a little over 12 years at this point. It started off as the Nokia Student Developer Club, and then it became the Microsoft Innovation Lab after Microsoft acquired Nokia. And now currently we are the PES Innovation Lab. So the whole idea is we have a summer internship program where all our seniors, who are people who are in excellent places like CMU, UT Dallas, UCSB, and some seniors are working in Google, Akamai, Arista, and a bunch of other very interesting companies. So all these seniors sort of get together and they decide to sort of mentor juniors through a research-oriented project.
Okay.
So that is what PES Innovation Labs does. And we also organize a hackathon every year called Hashcode, which I would say is arguably the best hackathon in PES. Having been on the organizing end of it, I can see the amount of effort that goes into it, which is why I would definitely, I have very nice things to say about it, basically.
Okay.
And so PES Innovation Labs basically is a group of some of the best and brightest in PES, a very rigorous screening process that has, I think we had 1,000 students apply, like an actual 1,000 students apply last year, out of which maybe 60 get selected to do the summer internship, maybe a little less. So I think last year it was around 30.
Okay.
Get selected to do the summer internship. And they receive mentorship from folks who are currently doing their PhDs or folks who are currently in the industry to do a research-oriented project for 2 months in the summer.
Okay, that's great.
And yeah, it's been, so I was head of PES Innovation Labs last year. And it's been a very interesting experience so far. I got to learn a lot about how to make research-oriented projects happen in terms of the people side of it. And I was also a mentor, along with being an intern 2 years ago in PES Innovation Labs. I was a mentor last year for a project, and that has also taught me a lot of very elucidating things about how to bring people up to speed on an idea and how to, deal with the unknown.
Basically. Just a follow-up question there then. I think you were also a TA for big data last year. How was that experience? How was it being a TA for a subject at PES?
Oh boy. So being a TA in PS is an interesting experience. You get to look at the teaching side of things a lot. So you understand that there is a sort of methodology to bringing up new ideas and how it gets taught. I would say being a TA for big data was a particularly interesting experience because big data, I think, has the largest auto grader of them all. We have a platform called Big Host where if you've taken big data, you've submitted an assignment onto Big Host before. And there's actually a pretty good paper about Big Host and its architecture that's out there. So it's worth the read. I think it taught me a lot about how to approach teaching new concepts because there are people on both ends of the spectrum, right? There are people who are already up to date on what's going on, and there are people who are not as caught up, and that's okay, right? Everyone starts at that. So being a TA really teaches you how to cater to both sides of the spectrum while making sure that the concept that you're trying to get out is getting.
Right. Interesting.
It was definitely an interesting experience to sit and make assignments and talk to the faculty and learn from them in terms of what their feedback on these assignments was.
Right.
And going through the whole correction cycle, going through helping people do their assignments. All of these are very interesting experiences.
That's great.
That sounds like such
Fun-
an experience
fun thing,
to learn from.
It was definitely an experience.
That sounds nice. Your experiences at PIL and as a TA sounds very helpful. And now you're working in complex systems at Couchbase. What draws you to that domain?
Okay, so when everyone usually starts writing code, right? Like we interact with so many components that we sort of take for granted in the sense that we don't really care what's going on, right? So computer science in that sense is a lot about black boxes. You can't know everything. And this is a pretty big domain, right? So at some point you decide, okay, fine, I'm going to stop at this level. I'm going to consider this thing to be a black box. And I'm just going to live my life from that point onwards. So I started off my programming career with web dev, right? I've been making websites for my school and stuff for a really long time. And me and my friend Shreyas used to do this way back in school. So we'd make websites for our Model U and stuff. And in the 11th grade, we made an election system, right? Which was the first point in time where I saw that, okay, there are bigger and meaner black boxes out there, like a database, right? So what draws me to systems is that there are so many things around us that we consider to be like immensely complex black boxes, which are not, right? So it's like an onion, right? So there's layer after layer after layer after layer after layer of abstraction, right? Problem is most of us stop at like the top one or two layers. Like we're fine knowing that, okay, there is a compiler that exists and there is we don't care too much beyond that point. But what draws me to systems is knowing that these black boxes are code. They are the same code that you're writing to add two numbers that runs the Python compiler, right? And there is so much to learn about A, how far the field has come, and B, how things actually happen under the hood that really do fascinate me. So what happens when I compile a program? How does that code become assembly, right? It looks like magic, but it's not. It's just code, right? And I think the biggest advantage of what draws me to systems the most is this fact. A database is just code, right? A kernel is just code, right? A display driver is just code. A text editor is just code, right? It's all data structures under the hood being manipulated in different ways and having different effects. But at the end of the day, it's just code.
It's just code.
It's just code, right? So what draws me to systems is knowing that by stepping down a level or two of abstraction and learning what's going on inside, you can push these systems to their limits. Right? Like companies like Facebook and Google and Amazon, like these companies deal with massive scale. And that sort of thing doesn't happen when you take components off the shelf. It requires a more first principles understanding of what's going on. And that's where most of your really cool optimizations come from. Right? Like, I'm struggling to find an example right now. But the whole point is by understanding how things work a level down, you learn how to push the system and how you can make it do things like, like billion scale vector search, right? Like Google is able to do right now, right? Or like how, you can have a MapReduce jobs running on thousands of computers at the same time, giving you a coherent result.
Right.
It seems like it's two opposite ends of the spectrum, but it's really not. That's the whole point of systems. It's all code at the end of the day, right? Of course, there is realizing that there are some very there is no denying complexity,
Right.
which is what you'll see when you enter a code base or when you try and parse it. But the important thing is to realize that it's just abstractions all the way down.
Right.
Right. So you have a compiler, you have a lexer and parser, and then you have optimizers under the hood. You have a database, right? You have a query layer, you have a cache, you have your disk underneath that, right? Then you have your operators that do all your stuff, right? Each of these components can similarly be decomposed that way. There is a lot, but it's not complicated. It's just voluminous.
Right.
And if you can figure out at what level to tune your abstractions, you'll learn a lot more about what you can change. Then you'll start thinking of stuff like, okay, maybe I can take this out. Maybe I can replace this with something that does this a little faster. Maybe I can, like doing systems is like looking at a program as a maths formula.
Okay.
Right? Like you can see it in its constituent parts. And then you can realize what's changing things.
And how's it working?
And how is it working? That's the most important thing.
Right.
Because realizing that it's just code gives you a lot of power as someone who can write code. I know that I can go and make a change to like Postgres. It might not be a performance change, but I can do it.
There can be some change to it, some addition to it.
It can be changed. You can make it do what you want it to do. Right? And that's another reason why open source is great. But yeah. Anyway, that's why I really like systems.
Right.
There's just something fascinating about realizing that all black boxes are just code.
Right.
And they can do crazy things if you understand that code.
That's
Right.
quite nice.
That's
That's
great.
very nice.
So we know that you're not only about tech, right? We know that you're into blogging and you're really active on Twitter as well. So how has blogging or writing things on Twitter or things like that help you shape your personality or help you to be what you are today?
So I think, I don't know if it was Paul Graham who said this or if it was Paul Graham paraphrasing someone else, like one of like the old Greek philosophers. But the basic idea is your writing is a direct reflection of how clear your thinking is.
Okay.
Right. And you'll know this if you ever sat down and tried to write something.
Yeah.
Right. Like it is hard to put words from your mind into a coherent structure that you're happy with. Right. So the thing is, writing more often in that sense, even if it's just smaller stuff, right, is a very useful experience because you learn how to articulate your thoughts.
Okay. Right.
And that is a critical skill because if you don't articulate your thoughts, someone else is going to do them for you. Like people can grasp what you're saying,
What you're saying.
what you're trying to get at, and they're going to say it.
And someone else might take it.
And someone else might take it for
Correct.
themselves, right? So you'd much rather be in a position where that credit is given to you for your thoughts,
Okay.
right? So writing really helps in that sense, and it's been painful to see just how bad I am at doing this because there are some times when I'll sit down to write and I'll write like the most absolute gibberish and I'll have to go back and edit it like some 10-15 times to make sure that it's something presentable, right? There are different philosophies to this. There are some people who think that you should just put it out there. Like there's this whole philosophy called the cult of done, right? Which doesn't believe in an editing stage. Like your work is your work. You just put it out there at the first draft.
Okay.
Right? The idea is that by doing that, you save time on editing so you can move on and iterate with it. But yeah, writing has been I've been doing it for a long time. Like I was that one kid in English class who took creative writing very seriously. Like I would write like my life depended on it, right? And I'd spin up such elaborate stories.
Were you from
about-
ICSE?
No, I was from CBS.
Ah, so,
Oh.
okay,
Yeah.
right.
Normally,
Not a surprise.
normally in CBSE, it's
The English
not,
part is
you don't
pretty
see it
simple.
that.
Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to have some very excellent teachers throughout my entire school life, and all credit to them, honestly, for any sort of writing and articulation skill I have today, for encouraging me and not telling me to stop. So it's a very useful skill. Paul Graham's written a lot about writing, which is all a good read. But
it's very visible in your writing that you follow Paul Graham's writing.
Okay.
It is a good thing. It's a good thing. It's
Right.
nice to see. It's
Right.
very nice to see. But, yeah.
so write more. Like my standing advice would be to just write more.
All right.
Like, especially if you think you're bad at it, write more. like unironically, especially if you think you're bad at it, write more, because that is the only way you'll get better.
Right.
And some companies take this to the extreme, right? Like I think Amazon doesn't have. Amazon has a culture where you have to write a 6-page doc about a meeting that you want to have. And it's the duty of everyone who's attending that meeting to read that 6-page doc, where you'll summarize everything that you want to discuss in the meeting. So some organizations have it as a culture.
Right.
And honestly, it's a good way to do things, especially if you want, like, if correctness is key. Of course, you need to have a bias to action sometimes, where you can't be bothered to sit and write. Like, there is
Right.
too little time to do that. But if correctness is important, and if you really want to make sure that you are doing what you think is right, then it is worth spending some time to sit down and write about it, because it gives you clarity
So nice, man.
in terms of what you want.
That's very nice.
That's great.
But yeah, that's very nice. I love reading your articles. They're
Thank
very. You can see your progression, especially through your older articles. It's very nice.
Thank you.
But yeah,
That's
speaking of,
yeah.
but speaking of writing, you had once mentioned on your site that your favorite poem was "High Flight" by John Jr. What part of that piece resonated with you so deeply?
So I think High Flight is a poem written by World War I or World War II Air Force pilot in the US. And I heard this poem first through this show called Madam Secretary.
Oh,
Have you seen it?
I started.
Okay. Good show.
Maybe.
Right? It's about the Secretary of State in a fictional US government who goes on to do bigger things. Right? So I heard about this poem through the show first. And I think it's a fairly small poem, right? So it's like a paragraph or so.
Okay.
But the poet makes you feel like you're flying, in the sense that the poet really transports you like 30,000 feet in the air, without saying much about it. Like one of the lines is, I think, "Oh, I've slipped the surly bonds of earth," right? And I met the silvered skies, right? Like, the imagery is just A grade in that poem. And it's a treat to sit down and read that poem and to visualize what the poet is talking about.
Right.
Because you feel like you're flying. So that is one of my favorite poems of all time. And it's so beautifully written. It's so well done in terms of how it transports you to a different place.
All right.
Definitely see why. Yeah.
Speaking about literature, you said that literature helps you transport from places to places, right? In a way. Do you like traveling?
I love traveling.
Okay.
Well, not so much the like being uncomfortable for a long time during a car ride or a train journey, but or even flights. Nowadays. But I love going to different places, and I think traveling has had a pretty significant influence on my personality.
So is there any one particular place that you've traveled to which has really given you a different perspective of life, or maybe shaped you in a particular way?
It hasn't shaped me yet.
Yeah.
But Japan would have to be it. So we went to Japan for our capstone paper presentation.
Okay, right.
And we went sometime during March. It's so it was my first time. Well, not really my first time, but I think it's my second time in a foreign country.
Okay.
And I didn't know it was possible for humans to be so culturally different, right? Because going from India to Japan is like going to a different world altogether.
Okay.
Because in Japan, it's like, even if you're in peak rush hour in the metro, it is silent enough for you to hear your footsteps, right? and I have a video that I'll show you guys later about this. Right? But people have an unparalleled civic sense in Japan.
Okay.
And there is a culture of being civil in Japan. Another interesting experience that I had in Japan was I was meeting a friend for lunch.
Okay.
So three of us had gone.
Okay.
And I think I was meeting a friend for dinner, not lunch. And my other two friends were at the hotel that we were at. And I'd stayed out a little bit. So walking back from the restaurant where I was meeting my other friend to my hotel is not a long walk. It's a pretty small walk. But walking back all that distance on my own late at night in a completely foreign country, it really showed me that I can do things on my own, basically. So it was a really different experience because we've all been surrounded by people for most of our lives. Right?
Correct.
Here I was completely alone in a foreign country, just walking, and I was dealing with my anxiety. I was dealing with the whole thoughts about the presentation, with all of this, and I was completely alone in a foreign country. And I don't know, something about that walk changed something for me
Okay.
because it was a pretty long walk, and I had some time to myself, and I was just like, wow, this is completely different, and it is honestly a refreshing experience. It did show me that I can stand on my own 2 feet.
That's good.
That's very nice.
Yes. So that was it is shaping me a little bit, I would say.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds quite nice and peaceful.
It is, yeah, no, the anxiety was not fun, but the rest of it was.
Yeah.
It's always that thing, right? Is someone behind me? Is someone following me?
So finding vegetarian food in Japan is a problem, right? Like,
Agreed.
like my breakfast for 3 days was coffee.
Oh no.
It's that bad. So yeah, coffee and a cream bun or whatever bakery stuff was there.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, just like, where have I eaten? It's that kind of stuff. But it's okay. Like, it's an experience.
It sounds good.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's definitely an experience.
Yeah. But speaking of things that have been an experience and changing things, not only for yourself but around you, you have started HSP here at EC campus, and you were also the head of PESU Innovation Labs. But I want to ask more about the HSP thing. How was it starting that? What was the most unexpected hurdle that you faced that kind of changed your approach to leadership as a whole, if it did?
Yeah. So HSP sort of happened by accident in that sense. Or I won't say accident, it's that I didn't start it like instantly of my own will. So when I was in first year, nearing the beginning of second semester, I was a part of PES open source, which was a open source community throughout that was started in RR campus, I think in like 2008-ish. And it's been on and off since then, but I think it's like properly permanently closed at this point.
Okay.
So I was a part of PS open source, and when I came to EC campus, ACM was the only tech club that I knew about, and they were very welcoming and nurturing, and I got to be a part of that club. But I always had this itch to do something of my own. Right? So I was, for all intents and purposes, going to start like the EC campus wing of PS open source. But that didn't happen because the club head of Hackerspace RR campus at that point in time, Aditya Baral, he basically reached out to me and said, hey, we're starting Hackerspace in EC campus. Do you want to be the club head? And I said, okay, because I was going to start a club anyway. Right? So someone's done all the legwork for me. Someone's been kind enough to do all the legwork for me and wants me to propagate and carry on what I think was a pretty good mission at that point in EC campus. So I signed up for it. And HSP started as Hackerspace. as the EC campus wing of Hackerspace RR campus. And I think when we started, we were about 5 people, all in all. I think we are 80 to 90 people today.
Little more than that now.
How much is it?
I think it's around 150, especially because recruitment's just happened.
Okay.
And we took in a lot of because everyone's so excited to join. It's very nice.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are a much bigger group now, right?
Yes.
And I think we did do a bunch of events as Hackerspace EC campus. We did a bunch of workshops and so on. But I think at some point we realized that the model that Hackerspace RR campus was based on, which is of an open community, was not something that was serving our needs and what we wanted to accomplish. Right? So our whole idea was that we want community involvement through workshops. Of course, our mentors are reasonably publicized figures because they do workshops all the time and they are known, right? So they are available to people in that sense.
Right.
What is happening in Hackerspace RR campus was as the activity slowly started diminishing, the community became a place for people to just solve their doubts. And that is not something I wanted for Hackerspace EC campus. So I think we felt that it was time for a new identity of sorts, right, as HSP, where we are focusing a lot more on open source. We are focusing a lot more on community involvement, but we are doing it through a different model. We're doing it through workshops instead of having an open Discord server. And it's been a great experience so far. I do have some regrets about it in that I feel like I spent a little too much time doing it. But I think like if you start your own thing, this is it's a foregone conclusion that you are going to spend a lot of time on it, especially if you're there since day zero.
Exactly.
You are going to spend a lot of time on it. There is no escaping, right? So it's been a very interesting journey. I have learned a lot. I think the most important thing that I learned is there are 2 things. So one is working with the administration in that sense. Like I, as part of HSP, I really learned how the college works, and I learned how the procedure for making change happen sort of works in that sense, right? I learned how you can bring more people to events. I learned how you can, take advice from some professors on what to do. I learned how to work with people who are in much bigger positions of authority. Right? And that's a skill because you will have to do that
At some
when
point
you
of
start
time.
working.
Correct.
Yeah.
You will have to do that when you start working.
Yeah.
As soon as you join, you will have a manager. And if you're doing well, you will get to speak to people higher up. So it's definitely a skill to learn. The most important thing I would say is conflict resolution. That is something I've learned a lot about. It need not be like person-to-person conflict. It can be group-to-group conflict as well.
Right.
I don't mean this in like a mean girl sort of sense, but I mean this in a what direction do we take sort of sense. Right? So take for example the Golang workshop that we did. Right? A large portion of people wanted to do it parallelly in 2 separate seminar halls.
Okay.
And I was not okay with that because I feel like, since we're doing it, we might as well do it in one place and do the best job we possibly can. Right? But being at that point where an overwhelming majority of people want to do something, how do you convince them to do what you believe is right? Right? And that is, I would say, the most important thing that I thought.
Right.
How do you deal with people who have different directions and different perspectives on how to do things and get them to work together? That I would say is a very important learning that you'll get if you're in a leadership position in any club or anywhere where you have to plan and do things. This is definitely something you'll learn, and I would say that is the most important skill because you'll use it everywhere when you're working with people.
All right, that's been a very interesting conversation that we've had so far. What's one advice that you would give to someone who's just come into college? What should they expect out of their college life? And B, to someone who's just probably going to get into their corporate career, someone who's just going to start working or something like that.
Well, so when I started college, it was right in the thick of COVID. right? Like this was immediately after the first wave,
Right.
and we joined PS. And like I won't say I've had a normal college life, but I mean I have no regrets. It's worked out pretty well. for me, right. So I really don't have too much I would rather do differently.
Okay.
To most first years who are listening, like I would say the two things primarily. The first thing is to try and find what you're interested in,
Okay. Right.
because being interested in something is the biggest competitive edge of all of them,
Right.
right? Like no amount of hard work from other people will will be able to make up for the kind of drive you'll have to learn more about something if you're interested in.
Right.
I can see this with systems for myself, right? Like it doesn't become work at that point. It's just fun. Like I'll read about stuff for fun,
Right.
And if someone had to read like at that same rate, right, they would have to put in a good amount of work to do it.
Correct.
So if you pick what you find fun, of course, this is something I've had the privilege of being able to do, right? And I want to acknowledge that. But if you can figure out what you find fun, let's say as a subdomain of computer science or of electronics,
Right.
right? Like if there is a particular field that you find fun, if there is something that brings you fulfillment and joy, and it's out there, you just have to find it, right? Because unless you like fundamentally dislike computer science, which I don't think is the case for most people here,
Yeah.
you will find something, right? Follow that. That's the first bit of advice I would give.
Right.
Because if you're interested in something, the kind of determination and drive that you can bring to the table is unparalleled. That's one thing.
Fair enough.
The other thing is, do not be afraid of building,
Okay.
right? Like, there is a line to be drawn between planning and doing, especially in terms of projects. And my biggest flaw, I would say, is that I tend to plan too much sometimes, right? So I've, like, over the past few months, I've made it a personal goal to not plan and just do stuff.
Okay. Right.
But I know for a fact that this has stopped me from doing so many projects because I just overthink the structure and I get overwhelmed and I just not do it. Right? Like I have a veritable graveyard of projects that have died because of this, because I overthought how to do it.
Right.
So what I would say is don't be afraid of getting things wrong. Computer science is the cheapest field to get things wrong in, right? Because it's not electronics, so you're burning up components that cost money.
Right.
It's not medicine where there is harm to someone's life if you get something wrong in your computer, in your IDE or in your editor, right? It is extremely cheap to get things wrong, and you have to take advantage of that because being able to iterate in this field is a blessing. Right? Like it is the way to do things. Like you'll only learn why you made that error after fixing it, and it's very cheap to do this.
Right.
So you have to take advantage of it by building. You need to have a bias to action to do things here. And this is a very like do as I say, not as I do kind of thing, because I've struggled with this a lot.
Okay.
Right? So my advice would be build stuff. Find something, write some code to fix it. It's okay. You will get it wrong. Everyone gets it wrong. I've gotten it wrong plenty of times.
It's just a start.
Yeah.
Really.
Right? It's not that you don't know it or that you can't do it. It's just that you can't do it right now.
Right now.
And that gap from going from right now to I can do it comes after you deal with those errors. I know a lot of people get overwhelmed by looking at compiler errors. And I get it. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to realize that you will learn after you deal with those errors.
Right.
It's not a problem with you. It's a problem with the code.
Cool.
Don't take it personally if there are compiler errors. It's just a problem with the code and you can fix that code. So, yeah.
That makes sense. And the second part, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting their career? Say a fourth year pass out or something like that.
Yeah, so I've been in the workforce for 11 months at this point.
Okay.
And it's a different world out there.
Okay.
It really is a different world out there. Like once you leave college, right, there are things figured out for you in college, right? To a certain extent. Like someone is telling you where to go, what to do at what point of time. You know who to reach out to for things.
Right.
But when you start working, you will realize that more so than in college, at work, there are ways to get a disproportionate advantage and to get disproportionate leverage by playing your cards right.
Right.
Right? So it will be overwhelming.
there will be like systems that you haven't seen. There will be projects that have like thousands of lines of code that look scary at first pass. But, and I'm telling you this as someone who has seen projects like that.
Right.
It's like every code base is scary as hell when you're just looking at it and you don't know anything. But with enough time, you will figure out enough to be able to be competent at making changes.
Okay. Right.
So that's one thing. The other thing is managing overwhelm is a skill.
Okay.
We all get overwhelmed. That's okay. God knows I've gotten overwhelmed a million times, right? And it still happens to this day. Right? You see a lot of information that you've never seen before. You will get overwhelmed. And that's just our brains are not built for this.
Right.
They're built to hunt and like get berries from places. Right? Like our hardware has not caught up to this yet. Right? So we do get overwhelmed. That's okay. But knowing how to manage that overwhelm, right, is a critical skill. It is the most important thing. You set up like a meditation routine or do some like have some silence in the day where you're not using your phone. Our parents were right. It is that damn phone, right? And there's no two ways about it, right? Like if you look at what reels and stuff are doing to people's attention spans, you'll get errors. And there have been books written about this, right? Like Indistractable. You have Cal Newport's Deep Work, right? All of these books have been telling us how our attention spans have been dying, and it is critical to know how to get yourself out of that state of being flooded with dopamine from completely different sources so that you can focus on what's at hand. Right? So managing that overwhelm is a skill. And you have to know to not be too quick to harshly judge yourself because you got overwhelmed.
Right.
Because that negatively impacts your progress. It is terrible for you to constantly shit talk yourself. It is not good. It does more harm than you can imagine. Right? So have faith in what you're capable of doing.
Okay.
You've gotten this far. You can go farther. It's bound to happen. The question is when and how much. Right? So managing overwhelm is a very important skill. That's what I would say. That's the advice I would give myself a year back.
Okay. That's great.
I'm sure that advice would be useful to everyone, I think, in every stage of life. I'm pretty sure that's managing being overwhelmed is generally it would be a very useful skill to pick up. But yes.
It happens a lot.
Yeah.
Like, even in college, it happens a lot.
Yeah, especially with like the new day and age and everything. In general also.
For sure.
But yeah, that's very useful advice. Thank you so much for the insights that you've given us today and for taking the time out to come over here and talk to us and talk to our listeners. Thank you so much for our listeners for tuning in today. Thank you so much for our guest, Anirudh Rowjee. Thank you so much for my co-host, lovely co-host, Parikshit Sharma. I'm Rima Sarkar. We're tuning off. Bye-bye. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.